All right, good evening all. Welcome to the September meeting of Ottawa RASC. My name is Mick Wilson, for those who don't know me. And we've got a bit of an unusual meeting tonight because we'll actually have some business-related material rather than pure astronomy, but that's going to be Dave's problem to deal with, and I'm sure he'll do it. That's Chris's problem now, is it? Okay. So, I will handle the introductions, keep the show rolling. Dave will do his monthly update on skies for Ottawa. Chris will then take us into this business relating to required changes to the bylaws that govern the operations of the Ottawa Centre. Then I'll be back at the mic presenting history of a very interesting guy by the name of David Malin, who had the good fortune to move to Australia, but I'll talk about that later. We've got the break, quite a number of observation reports tonight, normal observing challenges. Richard Taylor will be coming in online to take care of those, and close out with the usual announcements and so on. Yes, we are recording everything. It's going out live on YouTube, as well as being recorded for our own archives here. People online, use the Q&A, please, to ask questions. The raise your hand is not operating, and you're warned that anything that goes into the chat box can be seen by everyone for the whole of future history. 15 new members this month. I'm not sure if that's a record, but whoever's in charge of marketing around here seems to be doing a reasonable job. So welcome. I'm not going to read out all the names. Are any new members with us tonight? Okay. Missing out. So 77 for the year so far. Someone was raising the topic earlier about the benefits of joining. If the meetings are free, why bother paying for membership? And one of the benefits that I believe is the membership of RASC and the people that make it up and the guest speakers that we have, and the amount of expertise and support that's available for anyone who joins up. Yes, you can meet people by coming to the free meetings, but in terms of regular engagement, membership goes a long way for stability. Members get access to a number of physical resources. There's 30 plus telescopes in the Ted Bean Loan Library available free of charge to members. You get access to our club observatory out near Almont, the Fred Lossing Observatory, members and guests only. We also have out the back here the Stanmont Media Library, books and DVDs, and our librarian Estelle, where are you? She's hiding out there. Okay, so the library's open at the end of the meeting, back through the curtains there. As a member, you also get the RASC National Journal, to bi-monthly publication of a fairly academic nature. You also get our super friendly and informative local newsletter, Astronauts, and annually the Observer's Handbook, which is all good to go. Oh, by the way, the journal is online. If you want a print version of it, you can pay slightly extra and get it in print. Other benefits, there is the Discord server, which is run by Andrea. Andrea, say hello. That's Andrea. It's a now becoming quite active little community of informal communication amongst the members of Ottawa RASC, and it is members only. It's not open to the public, and a number of topics and groups that are now engaged, what, 24, something like that. It's quite vast. A more recent benefit is we have group access to Astrospheric. For those of you that don't know and are observers, this is a high-end weather modelling tool specifically developed with the astronomer in mind. So it gives you multiple models predicting clarity, cloud cover, transparency, and so on. That's normally $60 a year. If you're just buying membership, you get it as a freebie by joining Ottawa RASC. Membership costs a bit over $100 a year for a normal individual. For family, it's nearly $100 a year plus a per head cost for each adult and child. And if you're a student under 25, or if you're just under 21 years old, it costs you $62.40 a year. So think of the benefits, and please join at rasc.ca. Andre, you speaking to this? Don't kick the tripod, it's really precarious.
Hi, I'm Andrea. I'm not Star Party coordinator. That is Katie, who's not here tonight, but she asked me to remind everybody next Saturday is the tentative Star Party date. There is no date on the Friday because not a single person in our 400-member group stepped forward to help her out on that day. And so she won't guilt you, but I will. And also last Star Party, until like a few days before, a whole bunch of people didn't even bother to tell her they were planning on coming. So if you've never been to one of these Star Parties, I really encourage you to come. It's wonderful to share your love of astronomy with people. They're family friendly. There are children there. There are whole families. There are older people. You don't have to be an expert to bring your telescope. You just have to know more than the person who just came out of the car over there. And you can learn from your fellow people who come with a telescope, and you will learn stuff, and you will maybe introduce another person to our wonderful hobby. So I really, really encourage all of you to strongly consider coming to the Star Party, volunteering to bring your telescope, talking to Katie if you want to help with Star Parties next year. We are looking for volunteers. Many hands make light work. The more people who want to help, we can split the position up into 2 or 3 or 4. But we really need your help. We really hope that people will step forward and help us bring our love of astronomy to our community, who I think really, really values it, and they always have a great time. All right, so guilting will stop now.
Thanks, Andrea. Just to emphasize the point, this is the last public Star Party for this summer. Thank you, Ottawa Weather. But the FLO members' Star Parties will continue even after it starts getting miserable. Oscar, you're up.
I'm supposed to kick the tripod, right?
No.
All right, everyone. Light crowd tonight, but just want to announce the annual dinner meeting is on once again this year. It's going to be at Algonquin College once again, as we've hosted it for the past as long as I can remember. It's going to be taking place on Friday, November 22nd. So mark it in your calendars and set the date aside. We'll begin at 6 p.m. with cocktails. Dinner served at 7 p.m. It'll be buffet style. The main course will be either a chef-carved roast sirloin of beef au jus or a grilled vegetable lasagna for those who do not wish to eat meat. There will also be assorted cheeses, desserts, you name it. We've invited Dr. Jesse Rogerson and Dr. John E. Moores as our guest speakers this year. Here's the abstract that they provided for their talk. Our ancestors experienced the 5 classical planets of our solar system only as points of light in the night sky that appeared to wander amongst the fixed stars. Today we know these places, and even a few more that our ancestors did not, as worlds in their own right through the data returned from our robotic explorers over the past 62 years. How would those planetary environments appeal to our 5 senses if we were to visit them in person? In this talk, we draw on our research and storytelling from our book, Daydreaming in the Solar System, to help us tour the solar system and understand what it would be like to see, hear, touch, smell, and even taste immersed in the environments of our planetary neighbors. Through this journey, we will obtain a keener understanding of our universe at a human scale that will deepen our appreciation for our own home, the Earth. So I'm very excited for this talk. Jesse has given many talks here at the club in the past. And I believe Dr. Moores also gave a talk here. They're both excellent speakers. As we do every year, in addition to the talk and the dinner, we're going to be giving out our annual awards at the meeting. And if that's not enough to convince you to come, we're also going to be handing out some door prizes. At Starfest, I had a chance to talk with Jeff Simon who's the director of marketing at Skywatcher, and he's promised me a couple of really interesting things to give out as door prizes. I'm knocking on his door, trying to hold him to his commitment. So I can't tell you yet what the prizes will be, but be assured that they're going to be pretty cool. Tickets will be $65 per person. They'll be available for purchase today at the break. I'll be here with my iPad and the card reader if you wish to purchase with debit or credit. Online at the really weird link on the slide there. I'll also send out an email about it in case you can't memorize that link. And you can purchase by credit or debit online. Or you can also purchase by e-transfer to treasurer@ottawa.rasc.ca, and make sure you email me as well if you do purchase by e-transfer with at vicepresident@ottawa.rasc.ca with your name and your guest's name and how many tickets you purchased, just so I can correlate the financial transaction with somebody that I need to give a ticket to. And if you don't get any acknowledgement from me, from any emails you send me, just flood my email address until I do respond. Our goal has always been to keep the dinners accessible to as many members as possible. So the $65 price that we charge for tickets doesn't cover our whole cost. We do subsidize it partially. So if you're able to and willing to, please donate. Please consider donating some money to the club to help us recoup costs, either when you purchase a ticket or at any point in time. So yeah, thank you for your time here, and I hope to see many of you at the dinner in November. Thank you.
And thank you, Oscar, for putting in the effort needed. Another one of these jobs in the background that we rarely see time and effort that goes into it, like Star Party coordinator. One point you forgot to emphasize is how fabulous the food was last year, and if it's anything like it, it's well worth the $65. And we got a notice during the week that a former member, Ken Goranson, had passed away. I didn't know Ken directly. We got some words from Tristan Young in a way of memoriam for him. Kent was her former employer and friend. He was a friend of a great many people. He was the linchpin behind Focus Scientific, which even I'd heard of before I came to Ottawa, for as long as he could, because he enjoyed coming into work and talking with all the interesting customers and friends he met over 44 years. So obviously someone who's going to be missed. And so RIP Ken Goranson. David, Ottawa skies for September. Can I get the remote, please?
Thank you. Okay, let's see what's happening here. So first of all, the phases of the moon, sorry you missed it. The new moon was on the 3rd. We have the full moon on September the 18th. It's also a super moon. It was known by early indigenous tribes as the corn moon because the corn is harvested around this time of year. It's also known as the harvest moon. And the harvest moon is the full moon that occurs closest to the September equinox every year. This is also the first of 3 supermoons for 2024. The moon will be near its closest approach to Earth and may look slightly larger and brighter than usual. The days are getting shorter, which means we can start our astronomy earlier, which is awesome. Mercury, September the 5th. Sorry you missed it. Yeah, that was yesterday, but you'll still be able to see Mercury at its greatest western elongation, and you'll see it in the morning sky just before sunrise. Venus is visible in the early evening. Mars is visible before sunrise. Jupiter is visible in the late evening and through the night. So it's starting to come back into our evening skies. Saturn, this is a good time to look at Saturn. And September the 8th, it's at opposition. That means it's closest to the Earth. This is your opportunity to see the rings of Saturn before they disappear for 6 months next year. Uranus is visible in the evening and through the night, and Neptune is visible in the evening through the night, and it's at opposition on September the 19th. Now, obviously, Saturn's rings don't disappear, it's just tilts so that we can't see them. And there's our cartoon of the month. Thank you. Sure. A supermoon is where, because the moon doesn't follow a perfect circular path around the Earth, every once in a while, when we have a full moon, it's closer to the Earth than it would normally be. I can't remember what the numbers are, but it varies by, is it 60,000 kilometers? Somebody who knows a little bit more about the moon could fill me in on that. But basically, it's closer to the Earth than it would be normally. Frankly, when I look up in the sky, I can't tell the difference between a supermoon and a regular full moon. But it's the media sort of grabbed a hold of it, and we start using that term. Thank you.
I think you need to stay here, Dave. I think you do. Oh, no, unless Chris is, yes, Chris is, and you're driving. Okay.
Yeah.
And Dave, can you, especially for this talk, monitor Q&A?
Yes, okay, I'll go upstairs. Yeah.
Hey, thank you, Mick. I've got the great excitement talking on a wonderful astronomical subject, bylaws amendments. Mick, I think we made a mistake in posting this on the agenda. Maybe that's why the audience is low tonight. They heard that there's a talk on bylaws. So I'm torn between rushing through this as fast as I possibly can because it won't be exciting to most people. At the same time, the particular changes that we have coming up in the next few months are substantial compared to what we typically do every few years. And it would be irresponsible if we didn't give people an opportunity to understand the changes we're just about to go through, and we'll be asking for approval of members at our AGM in December. But before we do that, just a very quick little history, really tiny, just showing how old we are and then why we're incorporated. But RASC goes back as far as 1868, when the first center started as a one-off club, the Toronto Astronomical Club, and they had visions to grow beyond just their own club. And by 1903, they had obtained royal consent to rename to the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada, and we became its second member end of 1906, 1907, when we had our first meetings. And here we are in our 118th year of operation as the Ottawa Centre. And along the way, back in 1977, we made the decision to incorporate the centre. Why would we do that and go through all the bureaucracy and headache of incorporating? And here's some of the key things. They're not exciting, but they're fundamental to how we operate as a club. First of all, because we're a nonprofit and we're charitable, we're able to give tax receipts for donations. And those are not only important in the annual operations of the centre, but they become vital when we do things like build the observatories and have loan libraries and receive significant equipment donations. And we're able to give people receipts for that. Being nonprofit's actually very important to some of the venues that we operate at, including here. If we weren't a nonprofit, we may not be able to use these facilities at the rate that we pay, which is much less than for-profit companies. It's critical to the people who volunteer their time as officers and directors. They get liability insurance, and it's critical to everyone else's members, and that it limits your liability if there were anything seriously go wrong with the centre. So we think it's very important. Some of the really boring parts, but this is why we're having this talk today. Nonprofit corporations of our type are governed by what's called the Corporations Act of Ontario, that was formed in 1990, and it grew out of date. And in 2010, the province brought in place an entire new Corporations Act, but it sat on the shelf for 11 years before it was finally proclaimed, and it came into effect October 21st, 2021. And because it's such a significant change in how corporations act, Everyone was given 3 years to bring themselves up to speed, with that deadline coming just a few weeks from now, October 21st of this year. And it's going to cause us to take our letters patent, articles of amendment and bylaws and completely review and update them to be compliant with the new law. We don't have to do that. We can still operate under the old ones, but it's deemed that any part of those documents that is non-compliant is of no effect, and we wouldn't know which rules work, which ones don't. So we need to update our documents, and it's a big job to do, and we hired Carter's Law in Toronto and our lawyer Ryan Prendergast to help us through that process. And what we're going to have to do is revise our letters patent by filing articles of amendment. Articles of amendment are difficult documents to read, not very useful, so we then have to restate those articles in a clean and simple form. And then we have to create brand new bylaws. We're not amending our previous bylaws. That would be an impossible task to figure out which words are right and which ones are wrong. We start from scratch with a standard bylaw for a nonprofit and adapt it to suit our needs. And that's a really good time, and council made the decision to stop and think, are we just updating to meet the law, or do we want to rethink how we operate? It's a perfect chance to make some changes, which we are doing. So here's the schedule. Today, I'm introducing the subject to you. Over the next two months or so leading up to the AGM, when we have finally concluded the drafting of these agreements, they will be circulated by email to all of the members. There'll be a chance for questions. If we need, we'll even do not a session in one of these monthly meetings, but maybe a separate Zoom session if there's enough people with questions and an interest level to go through them. And then at the December AGM, we'll be looking for approval, which requires 2/3 of all the members in attendance at that meeting to do. But let me walk you through now some of the significant changes. I'll only be covering some of them, and I won't even talk about all the ones on here. In the primary document, the letters patent, the same objectives and umbrella clauses that govern our organization will continue, with minor changes, like we're now subject to a Charities Accounting Act, and then one significant change, which I'll come to later, about the class of members. So let me go into the bylaws. The bylaws, first of all, restate all of those objectives. We're deleting all of that because it's duplication and not required. But here's the first kind of mechanical change that we're going to have to go through. Under the current act, we're required to have an audit of our financial statements every year. But there's nothing that says what the qualifications of the auditor are. And in fact, all we need and all we've used for as long as I've been involved in the center is a volunteer with accounting experience, business experience, that can serve that role without them being a licensed professional chartered accountant. In the new act, we'll require a full audit. But we have the ability, if enough members approve each year, to reduce that requirement back to the normal thing, and which we're hoping to do, because otherwise a professional audit will cost a lot of money that we've not had to pay before. Here's the biggest change, or one of two big changes. In the current articles and bylaws, we have 4 classifications of members: ordinary, youth, life, and associate. Since we did that, National has changed their policy. They now only acknowledge 1 class of member. Everyone's the same. But that's against the law in Ontario. And we're now going to have 2 classes of members, whether we like it or not: adult members and youth members. The only difference being, other than fees, of course, are less for youth, youth members in Ontario are no longer permitted to attend AGMs and vote at them. They'll actually be in the room here, but youth members cannot vote anymore in Ontario in a nonprofit corporation. Then we go on to how meetings are run. I'm not going to go through all of this. There are lots of mechanical changes. None of them, I would say, have any serious bearing on how we operate. But for example, our current bylaws don't anticipate electronic voting in Zoom meetings. The new bylaws allow that. There's difference in how proxies are done, and you now can't vote by mail where you could before. These are small administrative changes of no major significance. Here's the other big change, and this has nothing to do with complying with the new act. It was the time for council to rethink how we operate. Currently, the center is administered by a council that has 9 people who are all elected every year at an AGM. You're probably familiar with most of these. We've got the president, vice president, secretary treasurer, 3 councillors, the meeting chair, and the past president. We're making one small change to that. We're no longer going to have an election for the past president. So it really doesn't make any sense. There's only one person who qualifies, whether they like it or not, they are the past president, and no one's welcome to nominate anyone else for that role. So we're eliminating that from the elected positions. Currently, 4 of those members are also deemed to be directors. Now everyone will be a director. Another change, though, we currently elect 2 members to represent us at a national reps council in Toronto, and they had to be 21 years or older. We're now going to appoint those people, and current law makes them eligible at 18. And the other change we're making is that right now we've been re-electing everyone every single year. So everyone came into their office for a term of 1 year. That will be 2 years now to reduce the number of votes that we have to do. But we're making a change to how long people can stay in their positions. Currently, the president and the vice president and the meeting chair are limited to 2 years, 2 one-year terms. They'll now be limited no differently to 1 two-year term. So no change there. The national rep term limit won't apply anymore because we're appointing those positions. But the big change we're making is that the other positions had no term limits. And we think it's healthy that secretary, treasurer, and all councillors have a 6-year term limit. Particularly important for secretary and treasurer to have more than 2 years. It takes that long just to get to know the job and do anything, but nor should you be here forever. Myself as an example, I'm only here forever because no one's ever wanted the job. Now someone's going to have to step up in one of these years. Yeah. Other thing, committees. We currently have 2 committees mandated by the bylaws. We're removing that, and we're going to say committees are appointed by council. We have far more than 2 committees already. Just like we have 4 appointed positions recognized in the bylaws, the editor, librarian, observatory director, and webmaster. We already have many more than that. So we're taking that out of the bylaws, and council will appoint people as required. Nominating for these elected positions, here's one small noticeable change. Up to now, nominations could be sent in by any members in advance, up to 5 days before. Under the new law, you'll be able to nominate people on the floor of the AGM. There's a lot of positive things about that. It's going to be a pain in the butt if that happens and forces an election that we weren't anticipating until that moment, and we have a Zoom meeting underway, but we'll have to roll with the punches and deal with that one. And there's some very important changes in law in fiduciary duties for directors and officers, but council knows those, and I won't bore the rest of you with that. And the final thing is that up to now, any changes we make are not valid until approved by the National Council. They've changed their policy. They only approve bylaws, the first set of bylaws when a new centre incorporates. They no longer want to see our amendments, which is one less bureaucratic step we don't have to do. So that summarizes the changes. I'm happy to take questions. Can do it now. We can do it by email. And as I said earlier, if there's sufficient interest or questions, we can easily have a separate Zoom meeting and go into as much detail as people want. And failing that, before the AGM, you'll be circulated with a copy of these to review. That's it. Now we can get back to astronomy.
All righty, thanks, Chris. Were there any questions for him? We've got the mic here. Dave? No takers? Good, you're off the hook.
Hands and Dave, nothing in the queue.
No.
I assume. I guess not.
All righty. Thanks, Chris. Who's been fiddling with my slides? Okay. All righty. So content warning before we start. Some of the words that I'll be using in this presentation might cause distress or discomfort or sheer violent misunderstanding. And so I just want to get them out of the way, and so sensitivities can be addressed. These are place names in Australia, because the story takes place in Australia. So bear bong. It's not beer bong, but you get the idea, and some people just don't approve of that. We've got places that whose names start with the word coon, and that can be a bit touchy, both in Australia and North America, but Coonabarabran and Coonamble will be mentioned. Dubbo, that is not the stuff that you rub on horse tack, like the saddles and the reins and so on to keep them saddled. That's Dubbin. So Dubbo is another place name. Umungary just sounds weird. Gilgandra, Gowang, Katoomba, Parramatta, Tittybong. It's a lovely one. Turawina, Wagga Wagga, Wallarang, the Warrumbungles, Wingadee, Wongabakun, and Wallamaloo. There is no mention of Woy Woy except for this bit. So now we've got that out of the way. Oh, I forgot Maroubra and Orange. Who's been fiddling with my slides? Okay, so here's the story. This is a photographic negative of commentary globule CG4 in Puppis. As you can see there, it's a very faint and difficult to distinguish object. There's an enhanced version. Okay, someone's been doing some fiddling here and a lot more detail is brought to the fore. Then it gets colorized. Okay, now we've got a much more interesting subject, both in a scientific sense and in an aesthetic one. There is more detail to be extracted from the image after these types of processing. I think that thing looks very much like the World Destroyer, the Doomsday Machine from the first Star Trek series, but that's just me. So, the question to answer tonight is, who is it that has endowed us, the astronomers in general and the images in particular, with the capabilities to render such beauties as, for example, Rho Ophiuchus, favourite subject for Andrea and others. How do we get there? It all comes down to one bloke, a guy by the name of David Malin. Anyone who has heard of Malin previously, give a shout out. Okay, that's about what I thought. So his very foundational work has with time become less and less widely recognised, and I think it's time to put the record straight. So we're talking a story of transitions here about his origins in the UK and movement to Australia, the fact that he started off as a microscopist and ended up in a high-level astronomical research facility, the technological migration from working with 14-inch glass plate for capturing negatives through to megapixel CCDs, and from wet lab techniques and hypersensitization and so on, to acting as an advisor for Adobe in their implementation of various techniques. So our story takes place, anyone know what this is? Very good. Who was that, Andrea? Okay. So yes, this is what started life as the Anglo-Australian Observatory at Siding Spring, which is in New South Wales, about 500 kilometres northwest of Sydney's. And yes, those are kangaroos just hopping around in the shrubbery, because that's how it happens. It was inaugurated in 1974 by then Prince Charles. It's got over 40 telescopes, not all of them active anymore, but in particular note at the Anglo-Australia Reflector, nearly 4 metres. It was at the time the largest research telescope in the Southern Hemisphere, obviously long since eclipsed by all the goings on in Chile and so on, but still, we got there first. And the UK Schmidt at 1.24 metres. Okay, so now we discuss a series of unfortunate events in David Malin's life, and the fact that he was born in England in 1941. Now, he couldn't help it. It was his parents' fault. But to compound things, he was born near Manchester in 1941, and this was the sort of tourist promotion material that was circulating at the time. Come visit sunny Manchester just after the Blitz. So you can imagine his early childhood was not necessarily particularly inspiring. Worse than that, he had to go to school there and eat school food. It was either that or go and work in the mines. But he went to school and survived the food. His life took a turn when at the age of 15, 16, he ended up with a French girlfriend. And in his own words, she was working as an au pair in England. 1957, he got a chance to go to Paris with her family. Culture shocks set in because this was no longer Manchester. And he had a box brownie with him. And so he was shooting snap photos, probably on 120 film, and then went back to England. Don't know what happened to the girlfriend. At that time, he was working for what became Ciba-Geigy, chemicals company, and there was a company darkroom that anyone could use. Now, he didn't know anything about photography or the techniques of developing and printing, but a colleague showed him the ropes. And in his own words, he was instantly hooked. He got tripped up by being found working in there at lunchtime by one of the bosses. Instead of being hauled over the coals, they said, look, if you're interested in this, we can buy a microscope and you can photograph some of the crystals that come out of their industrial processes. So rather than getting a bollocking, they gave him the opportunity to start developing the skills that would then later form his professional career. So he learns dark roomery at Geigy, as it was in those days, and all sorts of techniques that would then later apply as an astrophotographer and science imager at Siding Spring. So various polarization techniques. He developed methods for electron microscopy as well. And these had direct application in terms of quality control or product definition, and some of them led to patents. So the question is, how does a Pommy micrographer land an astronomy imaging science job at the newest, bestest observatory in the Southern Hemisphere and the whole Commonwealth, thank you, and even dedicated by Prince Charles? So by this stage, he's a middle-aged guy. He's running his own department at Ciba-Geigy, electron microscopy, X-ray diffraction, cross-polarization images, da-da-da-da-da-da. So he's now a highly competent professional. He asked about his prospect in his current line of work and was told, it's not going to happen. You don't have a PhD. You will not get promoted. He happened to spot a tiny ad at the back of a copy of Nature seeking a scientific photographer for the Siding Spring Observatory. Now, remember, these are the conditions that he grew up in. He's now got a wife, he's got young children, he's living in Cheshire, which is not a bad part of England, but in Manchester. But he applies for the job in Australia. Wife liked life in England, but she was Australian and happy to get back to her land of her roots. Also, it paid more. So now David Malin's luck has turned the other way. He has married an Australian girl. That's very important. The critical thing is the English knew about the Australian lifestyle. And so while they're living on beets and boiled potatoes and whatever, and they're still rationing after the war, we had Vegemite. And because of Vegemite, we had guys like this, not those scrawny little kids going down in the mine. These were real men and women. And so job sold itself. They had to go to Australia. Whoops. Okay, so Siding Spring up there near Coonabarabran. That was going to be his workplace. They arrived in Sydney and probably went through Woolloomooloo to get to Canberra because he was headquartered at the Australian National University there. Total drive time in those days, this is in the 70s, was probably 10 to 15 hours. It's a good haul, and it was all two-lane highway back in those days. Now, of course, Mrs. Malin would have been familiar with these types of place names, but I'm sure David was having a time of his life wondering what on earth a place like Dubbo or Coonabarabran would actually exist on a map, but there we go. The drive would not have been without hazard. Kangas on the road are a real thing. They're like your deer here, but they can jump further. The result is just as nasty as a deer here, but there's a hell of a lot more of them. And so driving those back roads, well, not back roads, they were the main highways, but by British standards, those back roads, out of Sydney, Canberra and getting up to Coonabarabran would have been somewhat stressful, particularly around dawn and dusk, same with deers. So yeah, you don't mess with kangas. Okay, so what's Malin's connection with RASC Ottawa? First mentioned, going back in Astronauts, and I wish Gordon was here. Gordon's not here, is he? Good. See, this is why we need the Astronauts in an archive. You've got to keep it up to date. Okay, so first mention in Astronauts goes back to January 1987, where someone by the name of Simon Sang introduced to the RASC Ottawa members notion of this technique that's known as unsharp masking, which we'll get back to in a moment. So someone here was aware of Malin's work and was now curious about what implications it might have for the images in RASC Ottawa. In March of '88, we get this fairly lengthy article from Rolf Meyer, who's a name of renown. And our newer members may not be aware, but he discovered 8 comets, the first discovery of a comet from Canadian soil by a Canadian, and so on and so on. Yeah, very high reputation. And the battle between chemical photography and CCDs was just really getting into its stride. And Rolf Meyer came down very heavily on the fact that film just had better grain and you could deal with reciprocity loss and so on, and referred to Malin by name as the guy who's making all this possible, and this CCD stuff with all its speckles and so on can just wait. 1990, Mr. Malin came to town. Well, sorry, he was doctor by this stage. He ended up with 2 doctorates, but the guys at Ciba-Geigy never took him back. So he gave a presentation in May at our meeting called Things to See and Do in the Dark. Now, by this stage, the transition to digital astrophotography was already virtually complete. The first megapixel CCD cameras at Siding Spring were already in operation. And so Malin's work with wet photography was becoming less and less vital, and he was developing other techniques. However, that didn't stop him with imaging. And so his talk was about what to do in the night sky with a little camera or whatever, and do interesting stuff. And we'll see some examples of that rather than the research grade image gathering that he was doing previously. September, same year, Estelle did a write-up on David's presentation at the May meeting, all these new techniques, night sky stuff, and so on, light pollution detection. My point is, Ottawa RASC had for over a decade a sort of working knowledge and relationship with this man. Astronauts, June, July of '97, we get reference to a process known as Malinisation, which was a chemical process for treating film to reduce reciprocity loss. And reciprocity loss is the longer you expose the film, well, you expose film for twice as long, it doesn't gather twice as many photons. By hypering the film, i.e. Malinisation, the sensitivity of the film can be driven over that barrier. We also get reference to an object there known as Malin 2, which implies that there was previously a Malin 1. And these are the first galaxies known as low surface brightness galaxies. One of them, Malin 1, is still the largest spiral that we've ever detected in the cosmos, but they had never been noted previous to Malin's work. Now there's over 1,000 of them known, but they are a class unto themselves. So the terms that we're talking about, his probably biggest, well-knownest contribution was instigating tricolour astrophotography. Prior to Malin's work, any attempts to use colour film in astronomical context was a waste of time. The sensitivity wasn't there, the colour responses were not realistic. So Malin set out to fix that with his use of tricolour filters and separate negatives, separate exposures, and each across the equivalent of R, G, and B parts of the spectrum. No one had done that before. The Malin effect is this loss of saturation, reciprocity failure, Malinization, ways to fix that, unsharp masking. Hello, we've all heard of that one. Malin brought it from his work in micrography into his work as an astronomical imager for science. Malin 1, the low brightness, surface brightness galaxy that I mentioned earlier, largest spiral known. He was also one of the two who first recognised what are now known as shell galaxies. We'll get to those in a second. Now, my point is, why am I rabbiting on about this guy? I had this poster of his on my bedroom ceiling in 1975. I'd never seen the likes of such a thing. I'd gone to the museum in Melbourne. They had posters, these full colour posters of the Triffid and Orion. I was a 15-year-old at that stage. I was absolutely gobsmacked and fell in love with the notion of this type of astro-imaging. The world was no longer black and white, especially that world up there. So, in David's own words.
This morning. But this is the telescope, and when you take pictures with this telescope, you sit at the top end. Now, unfortunately, the top end of the picture here is missing, but there's a tube at the top end of the telescope there, and it's in there that the camera is, where you take direct photographs with the telescope, and that's where the observer spends the night, in that tube at the end of the telescope as it moves around the sky, photographing various objects. And indeed, here is a picture of me in that tube, ready to go. You can see it's summertime. It's al fresco observing here in the summer. It's nice and warm all night. In the winter, it's a different matter altogether. Winter nights get down to about 0 degrees here. This thing is made of aluminium and it sucks heat out of your body. It's a very uncomfortable place to be. In this small chamber on the top of the telescope here, I have in my hand a plate holder because we use glass photographic plates, and you're going to be one of the very few people in the world who's ever seen a glass plate. We bought them from Eastman Kodak. They came in boxes like this, boxes of a dozen glass plates. Each plate cost about $60, so it's an expensive item. We've still got some downstairs. Since we don't do photography, I've opened this box today for the first time since it was made in 1984. And nobody's ever seen these plates before. They were packed in the dark, they were made in the dark, they were used in the dark. But now, this is what they look like. That's a photographic plate. Some of you may remember film. Well, film was about that kind of color. That was the sensitive layer on which light fell and which was developed in the darkrooms to make our pictures. After a lot of more chemistry had been used on it beforehand to make the plate more sensitive to faint light.
Okay, so just to underline, he's working at prime focus on the Australian Anglo telescope, riding that cage all night in the dark, changing plates, changing filters in the dark, and having to stay awake so that he could do fine guidance while the image data was being collected. I mean, for an Englishman, he really had some pluck. He'd done good. He deserved to be in Australia. Okay, so at that stage, he's working in a wet dark room at the AAT. That's not a picture of his lab. I'm sure his looked more like an alchemist laboratory because of the experimenting that he was doing, the development and the honing of techniques and so on. And you can tell that's in Australia because of the crocodile up there on the wall. Hypersensitization, treating the plates before they reach the telescope with high pressure gas. There's usually nitrogen and hydrogen, I believe. And it's seeped in to the grains of the photographic emulsion under pressure and expelled water, I think it might have been, and this resulted in improved sensitivity and less reciprocity loss. He would do contact prints from the glass plates and render them as negatives, which he could then use for further processing, such as unsharp masking, wherein you would take the original negative, do a contact print through the thickness of the glass onto a positive, expose that, and so the positive came out slightly out of focus from the original negative. And doing that then reduces the low frequency, so to speak, Fourier, low spatial change frequency of the data and highlights rapid changes. So you get this image on the right there, which is sort of the original. The one on the left, you can see the center has been overblown. The stars are overblown, but you start getting those shelly arcs becoming noticeable in a way they weren't on the original. So this is the advent of unsharp masking, again, coming from the world of micrography into astronomy. And this led to identification of the first of the shell galaxies. And again, the unsharp masking gives you the ability to detect. Those aren't artifacts. I thought originally when I saw these images, I was just looking at loss of graduation across pixel values. No, those are astrophysical shells surrounding certain types of galaxies, the origins of which are still far from clear. Again, one of our favourite subjects, M42. That one on the right with the Malin unsharp masking done to it, I've got that on my wall at home now. So the old Triffid poster's long gone, but M42's with the special treatment has a place of honour. The 1987 supernova. Oh, you missed that, didn't you? Because it was in the Southern Hemisphere, sorry. But anyway, Malin was able to capture images of the light echoes over the years as the shock waves from the supernova expanded away from the side. Again, a lot of overblown detail around the stars and so on, but the shells, the shock shells, become far more visible. And this is an example of low surface brightness galaxy. Malin 1, archetype of this class of galaxies. Happens to be in Coma Berenices, so we sort of just missed it for this year, I guess. Again, using unsharp masking reveals a high degree of detail in the spiral arms. In fact, it really sort of confirmed that there were spiral arms present. It couldn't be in any other sort of artifact. Fun things to do in the dark. He would set up a camera outside the AAT, shooting star trails, but defocusing at regular intervals, maybe 5, 10, 15-minute steps. As you can see, as the picture becomes increasingly defocused, the colour definition becomes much more clear. The reds become redder, the blues become bluer, and so I'm not aware of anyone using this technique prior to Malin. And it's not a high-tech thing. Anyone could be doing it out in the car park here. But it's cool. It's nice. So big thinker, high-tech stuff, and man on the street. You could do this at a star party. So this is David Malin. He's often referred to as the man that coloured the stars. I think he coloured the stars and the cosmos. And that's it. That's the man, that's his life. I did try to get David to make this presentation himself. He's into his 80s now and health issues and so on prevented that. So I'm doing it on his behalf, and I've threatened to show him this presentation once we've taken it offline. So thanks. Any questions about that? None of the insults dug in? Okay. Yep, lives north of Sydney at Woy Woy. So you made me say Woy Woy now. Now, before we go to the break, we have an impromptu presentation. Doug? Yep. Chris, can we get some light, please? Oh, all righty. So we're squeezing this in just prior to the break so that if you have questions or you want to see how Doug has done whatever he's done here, then you'll have time during the break. And with that, hang on. Doctor. Hello. Hello. Oh, don't. No, I was going to point it out. No, it's not. It's just sitting there. It's not with me. Hello. I can move back.
Yes, ask Michelle on mute.
Yeah.
Well, people online can't hear.
Oh, okay. Michelle, can you unmute the? Check. Why is it not talking? It's on. It's on.
They're mute.
I don't believe so.
No.
All right, maybe you need to just.
Okay, now it's working. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Doug Kearney, longtime member here, sort of retiring, getting out of the nighttime and mosquito infested nights and that. Unloading some of my equipment, and this is one I wanted to show you before I do sell it. I picked this up through the club quite a few years ago. It's a Russian TAL 1 5-inch reflector. And I also have the whole head and the 5-inch tube and the whole complete motor drive. So I couldn't haul that out tonight, especially considering the weather and I was going to get it in and out of the parking lot. So what I wanted to show you is this came with 3 legs on the pier, very heavy. And I just had no way of getting this thing level anywhere I wanted to put it, or, sliding cedar shims under it and everything else. So I devised a way of making machine shopped some metal cups to go underneath, and nobody would do it, so I had to do it myself, drill and tap for a 3/8 bolt, and then 7-inch carriage bolt where I can get maximum of 7 inches on any corner of it, and then tried to find something to keep it from sliding around. I tried tennis balls, practice golf balls, and so many things. Ended up with lacrosse balls, and they're just perfect. They're hard, durable, non-slip. And so I have put a few slides together, which I can maybe put up on the web later, showing how I cut them in half, countersunk them to take the head of the carriage bolt. And so the whole thing just undo the adjusting screw and then twist a little bit, and it's almost infinitesimal amount of change by moving one leg on the tripod. But I just wanted to show that. I've also got on my Skywatcher 4-inch scope did quite a bit of work on the tripod for it as well, shimming all the joints and everything, tightening everything up. And I picked up some running weights, jogging weights that go around your ankle, sandbag filled or whatever, and hang them from it to keep it much steadier. The wind doesn't bother it at all. So just some ideas, easy to do, and I can leave my name later. If anybody wants to know how to do that or what's hand doing it in a workshop, it's just ideal. And like I say, I'm going to be selling this whole thing. It's the only one I've seen with the motor drive with it. 3-speed that tracks the moon, the sun, and the stars at different speeds. And a very nice Russian glass is known for its quality. And so I've seen them advertised. They probably run around about $300 for the base unit and about double that with the motor drive and 12-volt drive for it. So if anybody's interested, I'll leave some information, and I guess it's being recorded, so those that aren't here can see it. And,
That's right.
willing to bring it back in again sometime. I just wanted to try and get it going this summer or finish up with it. So anyway, thanks very much. And if anybody wants to have a look during the break, I'll hang around. Okay, thank you.
All righty, thanks, Doug. Right, let's go. All righty, so yes, the break. Rest of the museum's closed. Restrooms are around the corner to the left. You can pick up tickets for door prizes, of which we have many this month, during said break. And something to ponder while you're taking a relaxing breather. It's Star Trails. It is two polar opposite sets of star trails. There are very, very few places on Earth where such a photo is possible. And so your challenge is, where was it taken? And we can work our way down through continent to country to location in the country and see how we go with that. Okay, so 10 minutes, please. What? Okay, fine, smarty pants. So it's in Africa and not South America. Geez, those glasses are yours. Where? Mr. Chisholm and his big mouth and his Hawkeye vision. I'm really impressed. Astronomy is the game for you, isn't it? Okay, so it's not South America. It's obviously on the equator. We're in Africa. Anyone want to narrow it down further? Okay, Kenya. Why Kenya? Okay, but so is Democratic Republic of Congo. So is too many trees, crap weather. It's a rainforest. And we've got altitude on our side here. So yes, this is Kenya. It's near Mount Kenya, in fact, a place called the Samburu National Reserve. I didn't take this photo, although I would have loved to. But yeah, look at that, double star trails. Kenya's a great place. And remember, whoever's taking this was dealing with all the creatures of the night in an African national park. Hi. You will see the stars south of the equator. Arcing the other way. Yeah. That's true, but to get the sense of both poles is. Hang on, why are we in the challenges, Chris? Okay, I don't want to be, okay. No, that was my mistake. Okay, Bob, you're up for observations, please. Okay. You can take it if you want. Okay.
This planetary nebula was discovered in 1788 by English astronomer William Herschel. It is 1,500 light years away from Earth and only 2 arc minutes across. It appears as a planet, thus its name. Since it doesn't move against the stars, we know it's not a planet. The planetary nebula are the result of gas being ejected from a star the last moments of its life. This usually ends with a white dwarf in the middle of the nebula and gas expanding away from it. If you know the speed of the expanding gas and the size of the nebula, you can figure out when it exploded. This nebula is about 10,000 years old. Slide number 2, please. This is a cropped version of the same image, hopefully giving a better view of the planetary nebula. Next image, please. This planet really looks like a planet. This nebula looks like a planet for sure when viewed through a telescope. It is pretty dim, and so when you look at it with averted vision, it seems to blink in and out, thus the name. It is about 2,000 light years distance. Next image, please. This is a cropped version of the planetary nebula, which allows you to see the bright center star and some structure in the expelled gases. Next slide, please. This is another planetary nebula. I do seem fixed on planetary nebulas this month. This nebula was first seen in 1790 and was added to the Charles Messier catalog of comet-like objects as number 76. It is about 2,500 light years from Earth, and like most planetary nebulas, has a white dwarf as the remnant of the original giant star. Next slide, please. This is just a cropped in version of the same image, again, to show some detail. Next image, please. This is a small, young, open cluster of stars that contains about 50 stars. It is about 5,000 light years from Earth. I was fascinated by the nebulosity around the stars and the hydrogen gas, which appears red in the background. Next image, please. The Veil Nebula is a remnant of a supernova that exploded 10 or 20,000 years ago. Even though it is 2,400 light years distance, it would have appeared as bright as Venus in the night sky when it exploded. This is a very common narrow band image, as almost everything in this image is either hydrogen or oxygen. But this is an RBG image. It is much too wide to fit on my camera's sensor, so this is a mosaic of 3 separate images. Thank you.
Thanks. Yes, Andrea. No? No?
You want your water? Yes. Bob? How do they, oh, thank you. Hi, I'm going to show just some images of the Milky Way that I've been shooting recently, just to give an idea a bit about the scale that you have when you shoot at different focal lengths. So most of my Milky Way photography is taken with a camera, just a mirrorless camera, full frame mirrorless Nikon. Mine is astro modified with a hydrogen alpha filter. So I do get a lot more color and display. This was an image I took at Starfest, which is a big astronomical convention in Mount Forest. Many members here were in attendance. This was at 15 millimeters, and it's a 2-part mosaic. So anybody who wants to shoot the Milky Way, you can just shoot one at the bottom and one at the top, and most programs will stitch them together quite easily. I love this one because of the air glow. Air glow would be coming from those green and red stripes that you see. They are, I have some notes, but I can't read because it's very dark. Air glow is kind of this mysterious thing described as the light of excited atoms in our atmosphere. I often see it at Starfest, and if you're in a really dark place, you'll probably catch it with your camera sensor. This is the Milky Way at 35 millimeters. And at this focal length, you see the Milky Way gets really, really big. It's very dramatic, but you do probably should track. This is a 60-second exposure tracking. If you don't track, you are going to be limited to a very, very short exposure before you get star trails. And just keep an eye on that little fluffy tree, and up above it, you'll see a little bit of the area Rho Ophiuchi, which I do like. And then I went in even closer in Starfest, and this is 135 millimeters on a full frame camera. It's a really nice focal length for Rho Ophiuchi. I call it space art because the foreground is not shot at 135 millimeter. It's considered protocol in this genre to use the same focal length for your sky in your foreground, but I was feeling lazy and I didn't want to go look for the foreground. So I just stuck this one on, so I call it space art, but both images were taken from the same location, different lenses. This is another image that I took from Starfest, and it's looking very green. Oh, it doesn't look so green up there. Basically, one night I centered the Crescent Nebula NGC 688, which is a supernova remnant. And the next night I moved it over to do this two-part mosaic. So obviously it's a lovely and beautiful nebulous area in Cygnus. You can see the blue arch in the lower is another supernova remnant, I think. The blue comes from the emissions in oxygen. I did use an L Extreme filter to filter for oxygen and hydrogen, and the Tulip Nebula is over there in the corner. Okay. And then I came home from Starfest and I tried to go really, really deep on the sun. This is actually white light filters. I was inspired by, they had a Dobsonian there with a white light filter, and it was incredible what you could see. This is on my C11. I have a white light filter, and at the very bottom, you'll see there's a sunspot that has a light bridge, and that's supposed to mean that it's about to decay, but it didn't. It just got bigger. So these were sunspots, mainly in the southern hemisphere of the sun. That's where it's really, really active. And I like that sunspot in the upper right-hand corner because it's like the heart emoji kind of sunspot. So lots happening, even in white light. Get your white light solar filters out. I make mine with paper. This one I did buy though. And then I also did some imaging of the sun in the calcium K line. The calcium K is a line very close to the ultraviolet, which is why the images tend to be violet. And again, it kind of looks like a white light image on steroids. Most of the activity you see on the full disk is in the southern hemisphere, but there was a really active region that was rotating into Earth view, and you could actually catch the prominences in calcium, which is pretty hard to do. And I also have been trying to work on processing solar images. PixInsight, if you have PixInsight, there's a new tool called the Solar Toolbox, and it's a Bill Blanchard script, and he did a really good video on how to use it, and it's very tricky, but it allows you to do these kind of black masks for the sun, which is what I was trying to do here. And so I thought, since I showed all these solar images, these are the filters I'm using. This is the white light filter. It Velcros onto the front, and then the glue all melted, and I had to re-glue. Anyway, it was kind of a mess. And then for the calcium K, I'm actually using a blocking filter from Lunt at the back. There's no front mounted aperture filter at all. It's just mounted at the back. And I use, of course, the planetary cameras. This was some H alpha pictures of a really beautiful prominence. This one was really, really faint, and I tried to up the exposure a lot to try to get more detail. I don't often overexpose the sun to get the prominence detail. I don't usually have to, but this one I did. And I ended up doing a little, it's not really a time lapse, it's a series of images from that day. I think it's August 3rd. And this was, oh, dramatic music. About an hour, and it changed, as you can see, quite a lot in that time, and that's pretty unusual for the sun. And those are my observations from the past month. Thank you. Oops, stop. Okay.
Hey, good evening. It's me again. I've been trying to get through my backlog of images to process. So some of these are images I took last year. Some of them are from the spring, but I think they're all nice. So we're gonna go through them. So this here's the Crescent Nebula. We saw a wide field shot of this very nebula from Andrea just now. The Crescent Nebula is also known as NGC 6888. It's a bright emission nebula in Cygnus. It's about 5,000 light years from Earth here, and it's about 25 light years across. The nebula is formed from the outer layers of a massive star that reached the end of its life. And the star at the center it's a Wolf-Rayet star known for its high luminosity and strong stellar winds. So the winds interact with the surrounding gas, forming the shape of the nebula. It's mostly made of ionized hydrogen, helium, and nitrogen. So this image was taken about a year ago, actually, August 27th, 2023. It's 4 hours, 18 minutes of exposure with an 11-inch Schmidt-Cass and a full-frame ASI 2400 MC Pro. All right. This next one here is ARP 84. Bit of a close-up there. ARP 84, it's a pair of interacting galaxies in Canis Venatici, located 100 million light years away. It's part of the ARP catalog of peculiar galaxies, which was compiled by astronomer Halton ARP. This pair of galaxies are NGC 5394 on the left and the smaller one 5395 on the right. They're interacting gravitationally, which is what produces the long tidal tails that you can see sort of coming off of like the galaxy there. So this image was taken a bit more than a year ago on between April 12th and 14th of 2023. 12 hours and 21 minutes of exposure with the same rig as the previous image. So the 11-inch Schmidt-Cass 2400 MC Pro. These are M81 and M82. They're two prominent galaxies in Ursa Major. They're part of the M81 group of galaxies, which includes other smaller members, which are in the image if you look closely. There's a little guy there. Those may be background. I don't think they're actually part of the group, but lots of galaxies in the frame in any event. M81 is a spiral galaxy, which is referred to as Bode's galaxy. So that's this guy here. It's a classic spiral with well-defined arms and a bright, dense core, and it's about 12 million light years away. M82 is an irregular galaxy, often called the cigar galaxy because of its elongated shape. It's also about 12 million light years away. It's known for intense starburst activity, and it's thought that the activity is due to the gravitational interactions it's having with its neighbor. Kind of stirs up all the molecular gas. This image was captured over the course of 4 nights, I believe, April 25th, 26th, and May 6th and 30th this year. It's about 16 hours, 12 minutes of data in LRGB and 7 hours of H alpha to try to get more detail in sort of the star forming regions in M8182 and sort of the starburst coming off of M82 there. So that was imaged with a ZWO FF80 refractor with a ZWO 2600 mm mono camera. This one here is the Needle Galaxy, or NGC 4565. It's a very striking edge-on galaxy, spiral galaxy in Coma Berenices. It's called the Needle Galaxy because it's kind of looks like a sewing needle because it's an edge-on spiral there. It's about 30 million light years away. And the orientation that we get to see it at gives us a very good look at that beautiful dust lane going right across the disk of the galaxy, and it makes some really striking contrast with the bright core at the middle of the galaxy. I took this image May 6th, 30th, and 31st of this past year. 7.5 hours of exposure with the 11-inch Schmidt cast. All right, my last one before you guys get too tired of me. This is Comet 13P Olbers and then Messier 64, just hanging out in the corner there. So I took this image, when was this? August, a week ago, I guess? August. I'm forgetting. Not enough sleep the last week or so. Anyway, Paul and I went down to Nirvana about a week ago to image this. It's really, really low. It was really, really low to the horizon. I think 17 degrees above the horizon when we first caught it. So we didn't have a lot of time to image it. So it's only about an hour and 12 minutes of integration on this. And the fact that it's so low to the horizon means you're shooting through a lot of atmosphere, which attenuates a lot of the colors and the brightness of the comet itself. If you squint hard, you can see the comet's tail extends kind of almost all the way there. And on this screen, you can tell it's a bluish color, and I've seen some really beautiful images taken by folks in better position to image it, where it's like a really beautiful detailed tail on the comet. So this is 13P Olbers. It's a periodic comet discovered by German astronomer Heinrich Wilhelm Olbers in 1815. It has an orbital period of 69 years. And during this pass, it came to perihelion on June 30th at a distance of 1.18 AU from the sun. There it is, August 26th. I knew I had it in my notes. That's when I imaged this. I took this one with a Skywatcher Equinox 80 ED refractor and a ZWO ASI 2600 MC. So it was 24 60-second sub exposures. And then in PixInsight, I was able to to do one stack that aligned all of the images on the comet's core to try to reveal the details of the comet. And then a second stack that was all on that was aligned to the stars to get the star field and details on the galaxy. And then you do some magic where you subtract one from the other to get the star field out of the comet image and the comet out of the star field image. And then you recombine them after to get a comet image that isn't blurred across the stationary star field, because the comet, of course, is moving at a different rate across the sky than are the background stars. So you'd have to track at two different rates. So instead, you do some stuff in post-processing to make it work. All right, that's it for me this month. Thank you.
Thanks, Oscar. You mentioned ARP, by the way, another one of my aged heroes that he was such an iconoclast that I think he deserves a presentation at some point. Thanks for the reminder. John Thompson can't be with us tonight, but he did send in some results he's been getting with his C-Star. I'd like to talk about C-Star in recent months. So he's looking at T-core bore, and despite the overlapping labels there, you've got the Draper numbers and T Corona Borealis in the same part of the field there. Everyone's waiting for T-core bore to blow up. Meanwhile, John, he could speak much better to this than I can. I'm just going from my memory of his notes. This is where he was doing some calibration of that star field in order to then subsequently do some photometry with said C-Star, which I'd never realized was a potential application for those things. So excuse me for not knowing the details of this calibration step. I can't even tell you what the software package is. But the result was that he was able to, through, what's it called, Salim I think was the software that he used for reducing the data to finally arrive at a estimated magnitude for Teron-RASC at 9.3, which would put it, whoops, I didn't mean to do that, would put it roughly, sorry, 10.3, roughly there. So John thought that that was a pretty good result for a small telescope. And has anyone else tried photometry with the C-star yet? Apparently not. All righty, moving on. Rick.
Hey, I must admit, I wasn't aware that I was going to be on tonight. So I'll start with a few comments on John's observation of T-core bore, because I've been doing a lot of T-core bore. I'm up to just shy of 400 observations of it so far. I'm actually on a working committee with the American Association of Variable Star Observers, attempting to develop some sort of an interface where we can use C-stars. There's a bunch of other ones, unistellar, dwarf. I can't remember the others, but there's a bunch of these new telescopes that are coming out, and they're really intended for pretty picture imaging. And so, you know, they're in the hands of people who don't know anything about photometry and all that kind of stuff. So what we're trying to do is develop a system where the manufacturers will actually include in their firmware the software to produce what are called star lists. So it would take an image like this, if you know you take an image with your C-star, and then you would presumably just push a button and it would come up with a list of all the stars in the image. So it would actually find all the stars, measure the brightness of all the stars, and come up with a list, which would then be submitted to the AAVSO, and the AAVSO would go through the star list and find all the variable stars, all the stars of known magnitude, and measure basically the brightness of all the variable stars. And so the idea is that, you know, then people who sort of think, oh, isn't this cool? Maybe I'll buy one. And oh, maybe I can do science with it without really knowing anything about what I'm doing. Certainly, I mean, a C-star is just another camera telescope combination. So if you know what you're doing, they're perfectly amenable to proper photometry and stuff. So, yeah. Well, I mean, it's just, why do we observe variable stars? They're, you know, they're beautiful astrophysical laboratories. We can look at mass transfer between binary stars, for instance. If we have an eclipsing binary where one star goes in front of the other, as mass gets transferred between the two, they change the timing of the orbit and so forth. Pulsating stars, as the star evolves, the pulsation rates change. The shape of the pulsation can give you a lot of information about the internal astrophysics of the star. You know, on and on. Cataclysmic variables are very interesting. They're actually binaries where you've got either a normal or a giant star in orbit around a white dwarf, and material funnels off the larger star into an accretion disk around the white dwarf, and then finally crashes onto the white dwarf. And so you get, well, it depends on the magnetic field of the white dwarf, for instance. If it's a low magnetic field, you get a nice accretion disk, and vorticity and friction within the disk causes the material to gradually move inward and land on the white dwarf. If it's got a moderate magnetic field, it will tend to swirl around and then tends to swirl up and down into the poles. You have extreme polars where the material comes across, doesn't even get to an accretion disk and gets yanked up into the pole. And all these things all have different physics about like the strength of the magnetic fields and the rates of mass transfer, the orbital period of the two stars around each other, the orbital period of the accretion disk. As material builds up on the white dwarf, eventually it gets hot enough that it will explode, a la T-core Bohr. That's what we're expecting is happening, is that there's enough hydrogen now on top of on the surface of the white dwarf that it's becoming, going to become thermonuclearly unstable and will explode, and the star will brighten by a factor of about 10,000. Sometimes if the mass of the white dwarf increases to a certain point, it becomes supercritical and actually collapses. You get a supernova, and it can leave behind either a black hole, a neutron star, or nothing. So there's, you know, huge amounts of physics. And to me, this is one of the most exciting things that an amateur astronomer can do, because the professionals can't watch all this stuff. You know, telescope time is expensive. It's hard to get. You know, you can only pay so many grad students to do the grunt work for you. So you can get amateur astronomers to do it for free. And so for something like T-core Bohr, for instance, you know, there's probably 1,000 people watching it, you know, so, you know, within minutes of it starting to go off, people will hear about it, and there will be dozens of observatories around the world that will all slew over their, you know, gamma ray, X-ray, radio, ultraviolet, satellites, you know, everybody's going to be watching it when it goes. So it's, we provide a real service. Well, I'm hoping it'll go soon, because actually I have a lot of trees in my sky, and right now I get about 10 minutes of observing time on it with my big telescope before it disappears into the trees. In another week or two, for me, for photometry, it's gone. I will have to just do visual observations. It's going to be another couple of months, I think, before, you know, if you've got a decent western horizon, you'll be able to see it for another couple of months yet. It's a lot of trees, and I must admit I like my trees. So anyway, so Assassin VJ blah 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 in Lacerta. This is a variable star. The Assassin is the all-sky automated survey for supernovae. And it's basically a system that observes pretty much the whole sky every night. They've got multiple cameras and stuff, and they're sort of getting down to about 13th or 14th magnitude. So they can find a lot of variable stars, but they only observe them once every night or every second night. So the light curves can be hard to reconstruct. And so one thing I like to do is I pick ones that they've decided it's like a high amplitude delta Scuti star, which I really like because I have a short attention span. And these things have a period of 2 or 3 hours. So I can watch them for a couple of hours and get almost a full light curve. So I'll do that for a month. I can get a really accurate period and look for any changes. Look for, you do what's called a Fourier analysis. So you can figure out, for instance, that it might be pulsating in more than one frequency. You can find out perhaps that it's doing what's called radial pulsations, but there are also non-radial pulsations where the stars, it's almost like it goes from a football, you know, or it'll go from a pin cushion to a rugby ball to a pin cushion to a rugby ball, except that when you get them doing it this way, they move around in waves. So it actually just looks like the star is rotating, like it's out around and rotating, but these are actually waves, almost like a tidal wave that circles around the star. So this is one that I've been observing. So you plot all the data. You can see this goes from, what's this, about 45 days or something. And each night is one column of data, so not very useful looking at it that way. If you stack them all together, this is one night's observations, and you can see that this thing is, it's got a period of like an hour and a half or something. And also that the light curve isn't consistent. And yet it's regular. There's, there's a high peak, two lower peaks, a high peak, two lower peaks, a high peak. So there's obviously some other periodicity in there. If we plot out, you take all the light curves and you stack them all together, sort of adding and subtracting the multiples of the period, you can get all the data all phased in together. And that's what the light curve looks like. So this is a typical high amplitude delta Scuti. This is also what your RR Lyrae stars look like, and your Cepheids, sort of a fairly rapid rise to maximum and then a slower decline. And I guess that's all I've got. Any questions? Okay, thank you. Yep. Who's that? They may be, I'm not sure. I'm not aware of that. I think they may be doing something. They certainly are one of the more advanced manufacturers with more interest in the science side of things. Yeah. Okay, that's good. And Chris?
Twice in one night, it's unusual for me. Here's a completely different kind of astronomical observation report, and it's an experience I had this week that was completely unexpected. I was out riding my bicycle on the Trans-Canada Trail. For those who don't know it, it's a converted railway track, and this section runs from Bell's Corners in an absolute straight as an arrow line out to Carleton Place. And this sign caught my eye as I was going by. I'm going, why on the side of the bicycle trail or Trans-Canada Trail is there an image of the sun? I should have stopped and read it, but I didn't. I continued on, and suddenly 50 meters later, there's the next sign, Mercury, and some nice facts about Mercury. I continue on another few pedals and short distance, and there's Venus. Surprise, next, actually this was a nice surprise, the double sign. What were the two different signs? They had both the Earth and the Moon. And again, all with these facts on them. A little bit further, Mars. So I plotted these on a map. There's the planets I saw, and my path that day took me out. What you see on the screen here, what looks to be in the middle of a lake. It's actually the wetland, and the railway track goes across the wetland. That was the end of my run for the day, and I turned back and thought that was nice that they had those signs. I wonder why they're there, and why did they stop at Mars? I wasn't thinking too well. I thought about it that night, and I said, not only did they stop at Mars, but the spacing of the signs was rather odd. It wasn't regular, it was quite random. So I went back yesterday and looked more carefully and read the sign for the sun. And sure enough, they have put together a complete model of the solar system to scale. And if you read the details here, each of the signs is spaced exactly in relative correct dimension to what it is in the solar system. And if I had read more carefully at the bottom, in 96.6 meters, I'll get to the next planet. So had I pushed on just a little bit further that day, I would have found Jupiter, and maybe it would have clicked for me. But look at the numbers I've added here, 97 meters to Mercury, then 86 to Venus, 69, 134, and then you leave the inner solar system, and all of a sudden, that's why I hadn't found it. That's a kilometer to the next one. So sure enough, I go back yesterday, and there's Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and they even put Pluto in and correctly noticed that it's not a full planet, but a dwarf planet. So when you look at it overall, here's this scale model that goes 12.5 kilometers. And by doing it on a bicycle, I don't recommend walking it. It's 25 kilometers there and back. It really drives in the sense of scale. So if you see the number I put up there, in the first 386 meters that first day, I'd done the whole inner solar system right up to Mars. But from there, you got to bike another 1 kilometer, 2, 3 kilometers. You leave Neptune, it's still another 5 kilometers to get out to Pluto. It really drives home the sense of scale. So my compliments to the city of Ottawa who put this together. I don't know who did it, but it's really well done. And in fact, as I stopped at one to take the picture, people biking by even were commenting, "Oh, there's Neptune." Neat. They're all in order. So people are noticing it. So it was great fun. Thank you. Richard, I will spotlight you as soon as I get back to the AV booth.
Okay, I'm here.
Okay. Hello, Richard.
So can you hear me now?
Yeah, Chris is just setting up Zoom for you. Okay, you're up.
Okay, well, here I am actually greeting you from the wilds of North Frontenac. I've been staying at a cottage here for the last couple of weeks, and I just feel incredibly lucky because we've just had the longest sequence of clear nights that we've had all year, I think. And I've been here in a dark sky area, and it's been absolutely wonderful for observing and astrophotography. So next month I'll have some more pictures, or actually I think I'll probably be posting them on the Discord server in the meantime. So keep a lookout on there for more observations from North Frontenac. Sadly, I will be coming home tomorrow and it's raining. Okay, so my observations for this month are of the challenge objects that I gave. Next slide, please. Oh, no, that's... you've got my wrong slides. That's the previous month's slides. No, no, no. Oh, shoot. I'm sorry, you've missed all of my slides for this month.
Sorry about that, Richard. I have obviously screwed up. I apologize.
Right. Well, again, look on the Discord server. I'll put them up on there.
You'll get your chance next month.
Okay, let's go on, and I will look at mine and tell you who got gold stars. Yeah, Andrea Geronis and Malcolm Loro captured Saturn, but with very poor seeing. And Tony Jarrett saw the Saturn Nebula and got a nice picture of the Helix Nebula. So next slide. Constellation challenge for September is, and I'm going to spoil the pronunciation here, Nahukos Bead, the female revolving one. And this is a constellation that is circumpolar, and so it does actually revolve around the central fire of Polaris. And it's rising in the east right now, around 9:30, 10 o'clock, and gets very high overhead by midnight. So it's a wonderful place for observing. And it's also right on the Milky Way. So it's full of star clusters. So that's the challenge for the constellation. Next slide, please. If you zoom in and look with binoculars or a small telescope, you can find the Owl cluster, also sometimes known as the ET cluster. It has two very bright stars that look like a pair of eyes, and then arms or wings of stars trailing off in either direction. It's not a Messier object, but it is a Caldwell object, number 13. It's also cataloged as NGC 457. So see if you can find that one with binoculars, or as I say, a small telescope will bring it out very nicely. Could we go back a slide, please? I've marked on here C13, that's the owl cluster. The next challenge will require a little bit bigger telescope or a photographer taking a longer exposure picture. It's NGC 281, also called the Pac-Man Nebula. And if you do see a photograph of that, it does look a little bit like that old video game character of Pac-Man. So sort of a circle with a bite taken out of it, which is a dark nebula encroaching on it. That one is fairly easy to see or photograph, but the final challenge for the month is quite a bit more challenging. It's IC10 up near the top there. And this is a little galaxy. It's called the Starburst Galaxy, and it's a remote galaxy that's coming through our own galaxy. Now, normally galaxy season, of course, is in May when the Milky Way is down on the horizon and we're looking out through the thin patch of the Milky Way. But Cassiopeia is right in the plane of the Milky Way, so there's a lot of dust and stars and everything else getting in the way. So it's kind of unusual and quite a challenge to see IC10, a different galaxy outside of the Milky Way, shining through the Milky Way. Okay, next slide, and then the next one after that. For the solar system challenge, you may remember that Dave pointed out that Neptune is coming up to opposition this month on the 21st of September, just around the equinox. And it's just a little bit to the left of Aquarius in the constellation of Pisces. Now, Neptune will be a bit of a challenge to see. It is possible to see it in binoculars, but you really have to know what you're looking for. Better off to use a telescope, and then you may see a little tiny bluish green dot. Best of all, to be able to be sure that you've seen Neptune, take a photograph of it on several nights in a row or several nights in succession, and you'll see something different than what Bob Olson pointed out. It's a planet, so it actually moves with respect to the stars, unlike the planetary nebula. But visually, they will look very much the same, a little bluish green circle. Not quite as small a point of light as a star, but you need high magnification to actually see it as a disk. Next one. And we're still waiting for it to blow up, as you've heard enough about that tonight. Okay, those are your challenges. Please give me some feedback. I'd like to see your observations on the Discord server. I'd like to see if you're finding these things that I'm pointing out in the sky. So let me know how it goes. Thank you, that's all.
Thanks, Richard. And again, my apologies for the screw up on your observations. Okay, our tentative program for next month are usual stuff, introductions, Ottawa Sky for October by Dave. We have Simon Hanmer on the program, but I am yet to be informed precisely what he will be presenting on. So that's a surprise for us. That's the only presentation that we have at this stage. If anyone wants to bring forward an idea for a second speaker, I'd be all ears. Thank you.
Mick,
Yo.
we have Cassandra Marion from Chasm presenting in October.
We have Cassandra back in October.
Yes.
Yes, we do. Good. Do we know on what, Chris?
I don't recall.
He doesn't recall what the subject will be. Okay, good. Cassandra, thank you. Observation reports and next month's challenges and so on. Estelle, back with us after her Starfest, has her book of the month on the origin of time, an analysis of Stephen Hawking's last years of work on things like asymptotic time and so on, I guess. So see Estelle out the back here after the show. if you have an interest in that or anything else from the book library. We have a request. Yeah, it's like a week-long program here at Chasm for doing daytime, presumably solo, public observing. If you volunteer for it, it's not necessarily a commitment to do the whole week. A day here, a day there might be more than adequate. So, yeah, there's a contact there through our outreach coordinator, and please give generously. Next Defilo Star Party tomorrow. Yeah, apparently someone suggested that it might be raining, but couldn't be. It's Ottawa, right? So yes. Our list of doers, the people that keep the club ticking over and keeping things available for us. It's the usual gang of Rick, Estelle, Peter Schutt. Pity's not here tonight. Coffee and conversation, that sort of hasn't been happening. I'm not sure there. And Art Fraser on the membership stuff. 35 plus 25, 60 for tonight. Bit of a quiet night. Thanks to our organisers and speakers, everybody involved. And thanks to the Chris and the Chasm staff, Michelle up there, who keep the logistics running and make sure the hall's available for us. As usual, comments, critiques and so on to me, meetingchair@ottawa.rasc.ca, or you can find me on the Discord server as Mick Wilson. After the show and after the door prize giving outering stuff, post-meeting entertainment at Liam Maguire's over on St. Laurent Road, McGuinness. And good food, good beer, good conversation. You might even learn something. So next meeting, Friday, October 4, same bat time, same bat channel. And please, observations, suggestions about possible presentations at future meetings and the likes, to me, meetingchair@ottawa.rasc.ca. And so at this stage, you have my thanks for being here tonight. Everybody out in Zoom land, thank you for attending, and we'll see you on October 4th. Cheers.